We'll go, right. Obviously, you've seen me, well, yeah, I won't give you too much background. It's in your book. But this is the topic area. I thought it'd be real easy to do until I started sitting down and going, oh, what have I let myself in? So it's called the right tree, in the right place, for the right reason. And I'm going to let a lot of the photos do the talking for you today, but I'll explain a little bit around them. So I was going to say that New Zealand presents a good climate for growing a huge array of tree species. We're very lucky in that instance. Where do we start? And I've picked on a property in the Wairarapa that notoriously I could never grab the client, and so there's bugger all work's done on it. We're waiting for the storm event that exposes it. Anyway, but we have a sandy mudstone to the north of this dividing line, and this is mudstone down here. So this is a softer geology, a little bit harder. I've done an LUC at 1 to 10,000 on it. So we have class 7 soils down here, highly erodible, and a lot of class 6, 6E, 6E3, not so erodible, 6E8, a bit more moderate, and obviously some alluvial flats in the red. Class 4 is the riparian areas. Okay, another little bit of 7 there. So we're looking at the physical features, and I'll go through and we look at the soils, the geology, moisture status, altitude, fertility. You get an understanding of what that site might present. The climate of the property, it's in a 40-inch or 1,000 millimetre annual rainfall, but it can cop any of these at any time of the year. Erosion, look at the severity, what you've got to deal with, the amount of sediment yields, what are you going to try to stop, whether it's the erosion or the sediment. Nowadays, water quality comes into it. So again, can we watch for the nutrient loss, sediment, runoff controls, and then we have the threats like animals, pests, weed, incursion, plant diseases. I'll put a wilding seedling down there for the rest of New Zealand. So we go back to that property, and because it's a greenfields property, I'm allowed to stick whatever works on it that I deem fit. And you can see some woodlots popping up here in the class 7 zones, or class 6E10, which is a moderate earth flow slope. It's on the move. And we may do a bit of drainage on that site before we plant it to give it a bit of extra stability. The yellow areas are all areas needing slope planting, generally poplar and willow, to mitigate from moderate slip and earth flow and gully erosion. A little bit of riparianism around a native, and the blue is a native designated area. The purple is the willow. We've got gully erosion down through that gully, and I want to stop that. So I was going to use the term pair planting. We'll use space planted willows better, but we're using the root systems of willows to try and bind that material up. Sorry. Yep. And the red line's obviously the new retirement fencing to go in to protect those areas. Up here, a lot of regen and some infill planting to fill the area. Why not? Okay, we've decided what works we need. Sorry? The rate for pop.
Stem rate.
Sorry?
Stem rate. Per hectare.
60. 15 metres apart.
60 per hectare.
60 per hectare. Planting at a perceived final stocking. So in 10-year poplar, 80 stems a hectare will do the job. At 40 years, 40 of those will do the job. And later in life, 20 may do the job with the expanding root system. You'll see some of it coming up. So we talk about the tree. You need to decide if you want evergreen or deciduous. Shade tolerant or full sun, what are you dealing with? Is it a woodlot species or an individual tree you want? Are you going to use it with seedling, a cutting, a pole? And I've put clonal in there. Everyone understand what clonal means? Most poles are clonal. They all relate back to one parent. And it's a repeated feature of that one tree. It just grows the same type of style. What's required to establish it, how do you protect it, what's its final stocking, 60 stems, right? Growth rate, fast, slow, medium, the rooting ability of it. Carbon sequestration, obviously at 60 stems you're qualifying for the ETS with all new planting, as long as you're over 2 hectares. Is it a habitat or host species or something? I put form and leader dominance in here. What do you want the shape of the tree to look like? Branching habit, canopy. There's a difference between juvenile and mature growth with a lot of species. Eucalypts go through it notoriously. A lot of native trees go through that phase. Compatibility with other species. If you're natives, understand what primary, intermediate and climax species are in a bush, because we need cover crop first often to get our major trees, native species going. Resilience to climate and pests, that's been a moving playing field as we go into the future. Timber qualities, heartwood, the rotation length, lifespan. How long is it going to stay there and be effective for you doing its job? And the management requirements. If you want to grow wood or whatever, you need to learn how to grow that. So here's an integrated landscape. And that was really neat having Raphael here, because a lot of your photos you saw earlier on were on this property here. We have a QE2 bush area. We had a little bit more erosion over here, no natives, so that was planted in the pine woodlot. It's been fully pruned and thinned. Here's all this shallow landslip territory facing the northwest, so very highly weathered and exposed. And we've got eucalypts and poplars, and we've got pasture. So there's 4 things going on in that photo. That's an integrated land use to me. Okay, we get out the Glendonald station. Here's a whole series of shallow slips, earth flow and a little bit of gully. But generally it can hold pasture on it, actually very high quality pasture. And there's your standard planting rate. And I'm going to add the word targeted. So when a drop of poles comes in here, contractors are trained at the spacing requirement, and then they do their 12, 15 metres, and then they look for the site that best suits a tree going in the ground. There'll be a little hollow over there or a sheep knob there, you go for the hollow. And so it looks like it's meant to be there. The worst case scenario is specifying 12 metres and ending up with a checkerboard pattern across the slope. Shows no empathy for targeted. And we've got dry tolerant clones at the top and less dry down the bottom, just to show you there's a mix. Right next door, a class 7 and 8 gully. The erosion extent is a lot more severe here, and the treatment needs to be upped to something better. So we take it out of farming, put a cover crop in, a woodlot species, and that in time will, in fact, it's going to make a killing in terms of money for the property, because these are all high quality radiata pine for market. When this is harvested, that will generate quite an income. It'll allow a wise choice on what you do with that next, and there'll be spare money to do other things on the property. To show I'm not all exotics, I've got a huge appreciation for natives, and I try not to mix the two together. If it's purely what I think it should be, well, then it gets a native, and this is native riparian on loose. Okay, truly integrated planting. It's Guthrie Smith Arboretum, Lake Tutera there. And just to show you the mix of trees that might be available. Having been there, they've done trees of the world in different spots. And I know this is Australia with Banksia and the Eucalyptus cordata. So I know that's the Aussie mix.
When you're talking woodlots, minimum size to be economic?
If it's pruned and thinned, down to 5 hectares will be really economic to do.
And bigger.
But if it's at the back of the farm,
Yeah.
give it some more distance, because roading is a huge killer.
So that example there, the road next to it is probably 5-ish hectares. It looked pruned. It's good
Yeah,
quality,
but we're going to harvest everything to the top of the hill and then build probably a 1K road back down to the road, yeah. So when you're planting radiata, you're looking at your out. You've already done your homework on how it's to be harvested. Okay, just right tree in the right place. You can see the soil creep in the background, it's loose. See the cracks through the ground? And we've got Veronese poplar there doing the job adequately. And down the bottom is gully erosion in the creek, so that's got willows in it. Those willows will tie up all of these fines in there. And because it's a droughty area, the farmers have come along. You can see they've cut all the tops off and pollarded it, and it's regrown. So stock fodder as an addition. Not managed for stock fodder, but in a really bad drought, used for that purpose. Someone asked me where the information comes from, and this is up at Knapdale, Case Wheatbins, and they've got a beautiful property up in Gisborne if you ever want to go and have a look at it. But these guys have got a lot of knowledge around trees, farm forestry, probably the connecting zone, and go to LMAs that have been in the game for a while. But don't be scared to tap into these. Right, I go back to poplar and willow, and why I'm here probably is that I started in 75, but after the 77 event, that's one that absolutely annihilated the Wairarapa in this area, we were desperate to try and get poles planted on this area, and it's really dry. This is 600 mil annual rainfall a year. Yeah, so very dry. It's full of totara stumps, and it was loaded with possums back then. So, Alan Wilkinson bred a whole suite of new Deltoides nigra cross material. It took him 7 years to screen that and get poles to us. Okay, they went out on pairs, just randomly over the whole hillside. There's 5 pairs of each variety. And because I wanted to learn a lot about this, I'm out there. And so by 1990, I'm raiding it, going in here and trying to fast track the picks in here till about 2010. All right, so an early picks were back in Akura Nursery by 1992. Our first Veronese, everyone knows Veronese poplar. Wairarapa was first to bring it up to the North Island, I think. Inga's gone, but anyway, I can say that. And it's been a very successful poplar in the North Island, and its attribute is it's quite narrow and it's quite dry tolerant. So we had that in the nursery. In 1985, when we planted Akura, all the books said plant Tasman poplar, so we went flat out into that. Tasman out here got annihilated by possums, and it couldn't grow in the drought. Stranded, we got the wrong bro. So by 1995, we had it totally removed out of the nursery. So it barely did 8 years. That's the sort of thing you got to do if you want to get on with it. Because if this is going to work for farmers, it has to succeed, and you've got to. So about a 15, 20 year time frame before the commercialisation of a clone, if the right work's gone into it. We had Tom here before, but we see a lot of it around, but that's native regen Kānuka. And I'll leave you to decide if it's got more grass or less grass. It is a slope stabilising species, but these are probably 60 years old. And while I have a lot of empathy for the native there, I don't think it fits in terms of the urgency to get something growing in a hurry. Back to some of my clients. These came out of Massey with me, and I must remember when we got going with them, they were enthusiastic to try everything. So we've done a macrocarpa and Acacia dealbata woodlock. Okay, as the climate's warmed, the incidence of canker in the cypress has really kicked it, but we've still got material down below. And the acacia, while it was really good earlier on now, has collected a gall. So these are the climate things that go on with time. And I don't know if I would plant dealbata now on the back of the seed sources that are available. So when they arrived, they were young, enthusiastic. I won't say stupid, but they're willing to give everything a go. Then we saw about 20 years where they really fine-tuned this property and put it to one of the top producing properties in the Wairarapa. And I call that the... Sorry?
Put in there now, Steve.
And down here they're freeing up time, they're retiring. They've got a lot more time on their hands, they've got a lot of money on their hands. And it just shows they haven't stopped doing what they're doing, but this is now around waterway protection, native planting and wetlands. Basically refocused a little bit, but they've got huge radiata areas and on their gorse hills as well. So I think when you have a client, you've got to remember what stage they're in life, whether it's high risk, can they afford it. These things are dearer than radiata, so you're already pushing into and more unreliable or more uncertain. I label this is Waikoku, and I label this our forefathers. I've never planted a Lombardy poplar in my life. It's rust prone. And this is the Italian hybrid era of the early 70s, 80s. Grossly overplanted, probably at 200 stems per hectare, and luckily they all grew because it's a southerly slope. Riddled with rust, overplanted, never thinned, never tended. Naughty. But this is a legacy for learning. We talked about 77 and the impact, and I just wanted to... So I'm talking about principles here more than anything, but when you haven't got a tree to do the job, we had wet gullies and debris zones coming down the hill, and so I planted willows and poplar up those. I'd best describe it with my hands. And on this hand is the dry ridges and the tops of the hills, and they came down like this. So the eucalypts, we could get them growing there, and the poplar and willow we could bring up the hill, if you could appreciate. And so that's why you're seeing that mix there. Integrated planting again, trying to look for the right tree. The eucalypts have been highly successful. Perfected growing them in little tubes and sheep grazing areas. And you won't believe it, the market's deserted us. No one wants to know about it now. But, next slide. By 1992, we had Veronese going in the nursery, and there's a confidence now to go to the top of the hill. So all of this paddock is done in poplar and willow. We didn't need those Australian trees anymore. Final spacing. Look good? Have I talked about the willow root system? Absolutely valuable. It's got a very fine, adventitious root. It binds clays, sediments, soil, just binds, and it keeps accumulating it and bringing the bed level of a river up. It can do that. What you don't do is read a book out of our couch tree and go and pear plant. Trees need space. So here's a pear planting. It's to protect this gully erosion. And as the tree gets bigger, it pushes each other out. These trees can be 12, 15 metres apart. The roots will still join. So a light zigzagging would have been a lot more effective long term. And you can then call it pears, but don't deliver that to me or I'll shoot you down. Okay, different trees need different protection, and the Dynex sleeve goes on the poplar, but for others, you can do that with sheet. They're quite expensive, but
What's the cost of that one?
I think you'd get the whole lot in for about $40. Tree, cage, waratahs. Considerably dearer than pole planting on its own, yeah. Back to Waikoku. And this message is around look after your plantings. And this is GF28, top genetics and radiata. If you have a look up here, you'll see a lot of leader dominance because those are all good crop trees. And the idea with growing radiata is to grow not only nice straight timber, but fast growing diameter wood. That's what makes money for you. And been huge genetic improvement on that. This is part of the farm plan, and similarly I managed and timetabled this work to be done. So here's this relationship building. Unfortunately, the farm is sold now, so someone will get the rewards down the track. And it's at year 24, but it's ready for harvesting now, looking at the diameters. This is integrated in a different way, and the farmer says, I don't want a radiata block. Highly erodible. We've got a main logging highway up to Namu here, and this slope's continuously breaking down. Been a few attempts at planting, and then I came back with a proposal. Let's do it in eucalypts. So there's 12 different species of eucalypts. The woodlot species are down low, and as we got drier and drier, I went into peppermints and other varieties. But we've got 5 of the ground durable eucalypt plots within there, so there's a whole lot of science that can be gained from that. I had a crew go through and form prune the original, so we're all good to go with tree form. There's fallow deer in here, unfortunately. These green things here is deliberate. This is gully erosionville, so it had Tonguo willow put all the way down there. And then up on the roadside, you can't see, but I took opportunity to put every poplar clone along the side of the road. So one day, everyone can visit each clone that's grown here locally. That hasn't quite been finished. It's 2013, 9 years old at the moment. Oh, and note, when you've lost your topsoil, you lose your tree growing ability. So once that soil's gone, it's a different status of growth. Up Hawke's Bay, you've got a forester there that planted a woodlot grove. This is a kauri grove, growing outside of its zone in New Zealand, but a warm site. I reckon you learn a lot off people that have done this. Around the corner is Tutera Regional Park, and here's an attempt to put kaikatea back in. No succession, you see, just straight kaikatea. It can be done, but quite a big loss factor through here. Too much grass competition. And the other thing that's here is goats and blackberry, my 2 biggest enemies. Yeah, I would have tried to put a pittosporum or a cover crop in there as party to getting kaikatea going, instead of just a 1-unit hit. We're back to Waikoku because I had to get a shot of the top third of the slope. And what we found over time, you've got to remember that we were the first in New Zealand to tackle this as a site. And I got thrown some terrible eucalypts. We didn't have the right seed in New Zealand. We had the wrong varieties. Through all that screening, I can say that the trees that really sprung out and excelled, my favourite pick is Pulchella. We brought it to New Zealand. It's a very light, narrow-leafed peppermint gum, and it retains quite a lightish crown and light shade casting. And the other peppermints of Amygdalina, nitida, they just escaped, elata, radiata, there's a number of them anyway in the peppermint, but not Nicolai, that's not a peppermint. I'm also learning what's brittle and what's not, so we're looking at the tree form going on. They're 40 years old now, they're doing their job. Might look a bit ugly, but they're doing a job. Yeah, there will be top out. It's pretty windy on the top of the hill. Alternative species, redwood's making quite a big move in the moment. My pick for carbon is this, because in 100 years' time it'll still be doing it for ETS. You can grow them at 400 stems to the hectare, and it will put on 4 times the basal area per hectare that radiata will. That's its canopy crop. Wants wet slopes. Downland, wet earth flow slopes is where this is grey-wacky, and it's not the best for it, but anyway, it's there. No, it's like a rhododendron. It's got quite a shallow root system, and it feeds on the surface. Back in its homeland in California, it gets that constant Pacific sea mist on it. If everyone's seen the Golden Gate Bridge, it's always a mist. That's the climate that feeds the redwood zone. Yeah, it'll be based around more moisture or coastal influence. And what it doesn't like is severe nor'westers and high possum populations. And if you plant it, it's very slow to start with, but disappointingly goes after about 8 years, and it gets on with growing. Also at Riwanui, and Tāne's Tree Trust have been involved in this property. And this is Matai. I just wanted to show that we had a success, or a juvenile and a mature stage, but this is a juvenile crisscross. Does anyone know why it grows like that in its early years? No, we used to have a thing called the mower that ate all the foliage, and this is the tree's mechanism to protecting itself. And then once it's above 2 metres, 2 or 3 metres, it changes into its mature form and it gets on with growing wood. So, again, Riwanui, year 13, straight after virtually the last treatments. About year 11, you've finished doing all your work in there. And so that's on its way towards a 28, 30-year-old woodlot. Back up to Gisborne. And we saw Case earlier on, our farm forestry. All his property is planted on a nice grid where it qualifies for the ETS, so within 15 metres is another tree. Closed canopy, or capable of it, pruned to 10 metres, full grazing underneath, 3 yields, pasture, timber and carbon.
He's got oaks growing there too, Stan, hasn't he?
Sorry?
He's got oaks growing.
He's got oats, he's got all sorts of tree species. I thought I'd just do this one, just to convey a message. So multi-purpose use of trees. Yeah, another little corner, obviously coastal redwood pruned here, Mexican cypress. I don't know where he got the poplar from, Dougal. They're not straight, eh? They're horrible, ugly things. And a banana tree tells me it's frost-free. So these are the signals you do when you're looking at a site. You can get a feel for what's happening. That'll make you dribble, Dougal. So, blackwood is impossible to grow properly in the Wairarapa. But if you pick your site, in amongst Kānuka and light wells, you can drive it up through the hole. That is how to grow this species, and without a wheel of a lie. This is the factory now, growing all the wood on the bottom. I think it's pruned to 8 metres.
That's right. I grew a block in the Wairarapa, 3 hectares, flat irrigated land, that was very wet, and then planted eucalypts. First block, second block, then planted poplars and willows, and that was the best.
Yep.
Just having that white winter seems to help with the warm, sort of warm them up. And then we sold it in the mature forest, but you know, they've done pretty well, but they do need a lot of work.
On the Gisborne Flats, north of Gisborne, beautiful deep alluvial soils, thanks to Tolaga Bay floods and all those things. But this is Kawa poplar, loves it down here. 14 years old and already out at diameters like this. Blows radiata off the earth with its growth rate. So just thinking outside the square. Pack Falls Arboretum is also up at Tineroto, Gisborne, and has become a haven for a lot of the oaks around New Zealand. But what's come out of it is a whole red oak momentum now to grow oak timber in New Zealand. It's just the starting of something here. Back to the Holt Forest, and a Douglas fir fell over and someone's opened it up. I just wanted to show you primo wood quality, no knots. All the pruning's been done, and that's growing good wood. Unfortunately, there's not a high market for pruned Oregon, but just you can see the quality of the wood that can be presented. Very rare in the world to find a log presented to the market like that, because very few countries prune. And here's a legacy, 80-year-old redwood, just blows your socks off. A lot of you, I put this in because we hear a lot of noise around carbon forestry. But that's what it looks like. I won't pass an opinion on it. I think it's getting our carbon sorted. But this is a whole new land use game. And that's what the eye sees from a prominent point. I think there's about 1,200 hectares gone under in one planting. Just a couple around home, trees for effect. Obviously we've got weeping willows and a swamp cypress. If you want to learn where to put them, you've got to put them for effect. And so that's in its autumn colours.
You didn't want to put opinion to that last one. You didn't want to give opinion on that last one?
No.
But can you? Because it's right to your place.
I want to have a field day with them. They won't come out from under the covers. And we've got a real rowdy sheep and beef unit in the Wairarapa as well. I don't want them in it today. I want to test their level of knowledge around erosion, pest control, tree management. I reckon, I've always said if you put a pine tree and you don't do anything with it, don't look after it, don't put it in. I think it's a tree management species.
Well, just on that, Stan, I mean, the National Environment Standards for Plantation Forestry are being reviewed. You might like to comment, Richard.
Well, not really.
No. Okay.
No, there's a consultation out at the
Yeah.
moment, and well, that's two things. The ETS had a consultation earlier in the year and looked at whether to take exotics out of the category for ETS.
Yeah.
So that and they haven't, but it's in a sort of stage and looking at
So what's proposed to have a management plan for those? Permanent.
well, what's proposed is to include them in the NESPF so that you're managing them, but then the question becomes what you manage. NES manages for harvest at 28, 30 years, so the question is what does that mean? So there's an option for management plan there, but that's kind of being sorted out through the
I think
ETS.
it's a good way to go. So then you're managing pests and disease
And there's a timber outcome at the other end. Or a transition to native. Had they involved me and we got the erosion hotspots planted differently and looked after, that would be a big plus.
I mean, this is just a...
This is just blanket, but it's an opportunity.
Well, no, if you go back,
You want to go back again?
I want you to help us out because we get this all the time, right? We get these
Yeah.
farmers, these eroding slopes, and they just want to put it out.
Yeah. Well, you saw the conflict. Sheep and beef are struggling along at $300 to $500 a hectare a year. EFS. I've got a radiata forest currently growing at $1,400 a hectare a year. And it's on the same competing land. What would you invest in?
Asking, whether it's appropriate to plant a pine almost species.
Yeah, exactly. It's the right tree for the right place, right for the right reason.
Yep.
I see all those pines. I don't see any conservation trees in a.
Yeah.
I don't see anything for civil control. I don't see. So
Yeah.
that was one of your.
If the focus is carbon outright, that's the job.
Didn't you just say before that the poplars would blow the pines out of the water, so wouldn't you rather see...
Oh, that was on a beautiful alluvial flat. So different sites, different trees prevail.
So you wouldn't rather see that?
No, because radiata will find a nice little fertility spot, grow no roots, cop a nor'wester in the Gisborne weather, and fall over on you. Yeah, so no good on alluvium really, and they grow big, fat, horrible trees with big branches. That's their growth profile.
So the gully photo you showed us before, you wouldn't rather see that in poplars with sheep and cattle underneath it?
Probably, yeah. Okay.
Pine isn't going to be harvested.
Sorry?
If pine isn't going to be harvested, though, then wouldn't it be appropriate in some instances on those steep eroding slopes because it is good at holding slopes together?
It's doing a job for erosion. Yep. And if they've got rid of every deer and pig, I think all the neighbours will be very, very happy with that. And if old man Speg comes in and that's all uncontrolled, then they're showing that they're good land users, responsible and part of the community and the way they operate.
Just thinking about what's the surrounding habitat going to be like. So, if you are leaving them there, what's going to happen to them in that situation? And actually, if a tree falls down and rots over time, it's not necessarily a bad thing, but things like bird migrates, troubles.
If they all fall over and leave a giant tree fall, it's supposed to
They don't all fall over, but there are risks around. Just appreciate endangered species. I've got some Olearia gardneri. There's probably only about 200 plants in the Wairarapa, really rare. And if you can foster that, then you're doing and Carcabeak's another threatened species. Right, some one-liners just to finish with. Do your homework and understand your tree's needs. Seasons vary. If you have a failure, it doesn't mean it's the norm. Have another go. This is the Wairarapa weather, anyway. Remember the planting bit's the easy bit. I always find the trouble comes in the maintenance, the silviculture, the time and the costs down the track of looking after them and nurturing them through. Make sure that when you buy stock, it's been conditioned for sale. Good roots spread on it, grown for purpose. And I put the word there, nurtured, but you can fake a plant up to speed by nitrogen and making it soft and not frost hardened off, and you lose it. Be real discerning around good nursery practices. Always audit your stuff. I'll put there as a learning phase, so you learn about what you're doing. Make sure your interventions are timely. So I said year 2 for form pruning on poplar. Low impact pruning doesn't slow the tree down. Massive branch removal does. Stay on target. The end vision is 400 stems of prune redwood at year 100. Stay there. Take it on its journey to that point. Don't back off. Be aware of the changing climate. I have to say it's become increasingly difficult in my latter years to try and grow some trees. Use a broad genetic base as opposed to a monoclonal planting. We saw the carbon one.
Is that a risk?
Yeah. So you'll find most farm plan allocations, or Justin's there will be 20 Veronese, 20 Otahua, 10 Fraser, 30 Tongoyo. There might be 8 different clones aimed at a target site. Yeah. No, so very rarely do you 100% of one clone. Yep. So plant enough trees for the final crop. And what to do? With radiata, you want a 1 in 3 selection on GF19s. If you don't plant enough, you won't have enough selection to get to the other end. If you're planting a large tree, understand the space needs it needs. So open up with time, give it more space. Just difference between clonal and seedling. Seedling has got cross-pollinated. Obviously, you end up with a whole array of different genetic variation in the species, but clonal follows the one parent line. So Veronese poplars clonal, Leyland cypress, Leighton green, Ovenzii is another clonal, but some of them are very good at doing a consistent job through a site, but they are all one of you. Use succession to your advantage, so that was that Kaikatea. Put cover crop in first. It will assist the canopy trees to get up and running. And where have I? Yes, I've made a huge amount of mistakes, and I'm still learning. And my son put that on, but if anyone wants to annoy me, I'll try and answer a question or two.